The West Virginia Mountaineers are back at it, which means we are back at it here with episode 2 of the Mountaineer Report, brought to you by WVU Sports Now. I am Mike Asti, and that, of course, is Ethan Bock. To get right into things, we now have heard from Neal Brow. We now have heard from some of the players, the key leader players, by the way, and I've seen a day of practice with a lot more to come here as we get going, only weeks until the new season kicks off. So, Ethan, you watch Neal Brow, you watch Garrett Greene, Sean Martin, and you watch Wyatt Milam. They had some strong comments. What were your main takeaways from what you heard from Brown and company?
Main takeaway was 2023 gave this group obviously a sense of confidence, but also security as well, especially with Neal Brown's job. Neal seems way more comfortable. He seems way less stressed.
Yeah.
I don't blame him.
Yeah.
But just to see him say he's fired up, and even if he's not fully truthful about that, it comes off good. And same with Garrett Greene's comments about wanting to win the Big 12.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's some of West Virginia fans' expectations, especially in this new conference without Texas and Oklahoma.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of solid teams in this conference, and it's a deep conference now. There might be a definitive one with Utah, but after that, it's just a bunch of it's just a group of teams that can compete for that second spot, or if not, knock Utah out of that spot. So it's cool to see them motivated and fired up. Let's see if they actually can prove that on the field this year.
Yeah, I'm not sure yet if I'm predicting and picking them to win the Big 12 in year one of this new 16-team format. And Utah right now is the clear favorite. They were picked in the Big 12 media poll. West Virginia only came in 7th. I did vote in that. But anytime I'm asked from now on any show I appear or any show that I host, what are the expectations of this program for this year? What's fair to expect? I'm going to say it's fair now to expect a Big 12 title because that is what the program's selling. They may not do it. And yeah, there's depth and there's reasons to believe that maybe they're going to be held back from being in Dallas and competing for a conference title, even if they have a good year. It's not like this should be a horrible year, but it's not going to be easy to win the Big 12. But that's clearly the expectations of the program from Brown on down, Brown and Greene. Individual goals, I don't have any. It's about a Big 12 championship. That's all I care about. It's kind of paraphrasing Greene. So when you have your quarterback, who's now legit QB1, going into the season, QB1, has a season under his belt as the starter, but entering this year, no quarterback battle, different vibe for him. Neal Brow, you mentioned it, has a contract extension. I have detailed, and others have, that there now are parts of that could make it easier for the program to fire him if they all of a sudden would have a horrible year because the buyout has been decreased. He did take some money off and hope it goes to assistant coaches and other parts of the program. But they're saying conference title. They are saying they want in the playoff. They believe they can be in the playoff, and you win the conference, you are there. They won 9 a season ago. They should have probably at least won 10 if Greene would have kept his helmet on. I mean, that right there would have been a 10th win. They blew another game to OSU and Oklahoma State. That could have been 11. Like, it sounds crazy, but that's the truth of that year. So the expectations are very, very high, and the vibes are very, very good around there. Everyone's laughing. Brown's asking you about your family. Wasn't the case, Ethan. I will tell you. No questions asking about my family a year ago. Brown didn't even want to talk to anybody. He was snickering if you even looked his way and you weren't a player at practice. Definitely a different vibe around the Mountaineers. And it also still feels like they have a chip on their shoulder that they're kind of still being doubted nationally. They were picked 7th after they just won 9 and should have won more. New teams are coming in. All-time winningest program in the conference. They do feel slighted. Brown also talked about that. He feels they're historically disrespected as well as currently. So they got to prove all of it, though. Because all this talking, if they end up winning 7 games and finishing 7th, that's going to throw egg on their face after they proved doubters wrong a year ago.
Yeah, the schedule's, I think, clearly harder than last season's.
I was going to ask you that. What are your thoughts on the schedule? Because that's
I mean, I think going into last year, we said the same thing. The schedule looked tough.
Yeah.
Especially that stretch of Penn State, Pitt, at TCU, Texas Tech, just that beginning of conference play and then the non-con. I think we all said it was a tough stretch for the Mountaineers.
Yeah.
But then those teams honestly weren't that great. Like, I mean,
Yeah,
West Virginia needed 2 blocked
wasn't as tough
kicks
as
against
expected.
TCU.
Right.
And Nico was able to come in against Pitt and Texas Tech and handle his own, and but those teams weren't great either. But this season's different just because, like you said, the expectations. I think my expectations for this team is to get 9-10 wins. I mean, they have to keep improving that win total.
Okay.
I don't know if the Big 12 title game is realistic.
If they win 10, you don't think that would put them maybe at least competing, even if they lose the game in Dallas? I mean, that's a lot of wins. Utah could win more.
I'm thinking with the schedule and just like I talked about earlier, there's so many teams in this conference that can play in that Big 12 title game.
100%.
They definitely could, but
yeah.
I think with that schedule, it's really tough. And I'm just looking at it as they can't step back. They can't have 8, 7, 6 wins. They have to have they at least have to match last year with the strength of schedule they have this year. I think definitely the Big 12 opponents they play are tougher than the group that they played last year, especially with the home and away situations.
Yeah, and a streak. There's a gauntlet they got to ride out. I mean, after they deal with this out of conference slate, and Pitt shouldn't be that great of a team. No one's really expecting them, to do anything. Although it's in Pittsburgh, it's on the road this year. Penn State is still supposed to be kind of what they always are, a 10-win team, maybe Big Ten, maybe not Big Ten. Their expectations are to win a conference. They just haven't really been doing that, but they should still be better than West Virginia. You would imagine they're favored, even though it's in Morgantown. Albany's no joke on the FCS level, but you got to figure West Virginia wins that game. But then they start a conference slate that is rough. I mean, they're going to Arizona, Kansas State. A lot of these games are in a row that they're going to have. So they could either be a legit contender and absolutely ranked in the top 25 by Thanksgiving, Ethan, or by Thanksgiving, we could be talking that Neal Brow might get fired because they have decreased the buyout. That first 6-game slate is really, really important, 6, 7 games. And you could argue the out-of-conference games don't mean as much now because if you win the conference, you're automatically in the playoff. So you could even argue that it's really all about once you get in Big 12 play, and then those first 5 games in Big 12 play are a big deal. Now, they have the cushion that if they lose one of those, even if they lose a couple of those, they have an easier slate at the end of the year. They should be able to rattle off, which is what they've been doing, whether it's a good or bad year. If you even look at 2022, they were strong at the end of the season. If they have a hot streak and win 2 out of their last 3 or 3 in a row to end the year, that could make up ground to what they did earlier in the season. But it's gonna be a loaded Big 12, and maybe nobody is a top 5 national team that's going to win a national title this year. But there's a lot of depth. There's a lot of teams that maybe will win anywhere from 7 to 9 games. And they don't want to be on the 7 side. They want to be on the 9 or maybe even more 10 side. I do think if they win 10, they're probably in the title game. But even if they get there, there's no guarantee to winning it. I mean, again, you figure Utah would be that team. Oklahoma State, Kansas State are always brought up. You could argue some slates like Iowa State was picked ahead of them. Is that fair off of last year, off of even this roster, with everything the Mountaineers are returning, with what they did add in the portal? But Neal Brow said something last year, Ethan, that I think is fitting and why they shouldn't care so much what the Big 12 media poll says. The Big 12 media poll has never predicted a champion correctly. We've never been right. So they're putting a lot of stock into it, and they clearly hear what we say. But that schedule, it'll remain to be evaluated like last year. I mean, nationally, it was said, I think, before the year to even be the 3rd toughest schedule in the whole country. And then a lot of those teams weren't nearly rank what they were supposed to be. And I think it needs to be said, too, that if they would beat Penn State, that doesn't guarantee they're going to go undefeated. Like, every game is different. But outside of the schedule, We did hear a little bit about individual goals throughout the last couple of weeks, even going to what Garrett Greene said in Vegas at Big 12 Media Day. Now, of course, as you mentioned, he said he wants to win the Big 12 title and that's it. But he mentioned about his completion percentage. A lot of talk on that early in camp here. We'll get to a lot of other storylines as we go with this show. I also wrote about a lot of storylines to look at WV Sports Now. They want him at 60. He was at 52.9 last year. Greene said he's going to be at 65. What's realistic for Garrett Greene this year, completion percentage wise, and how big of a deal do you think that is for his season and for this team's goals? Because it seems like the conversation is all about this man's completion percentage on what he can do this year.
Yeah, just like the team's expectations, all of a sudden they've skyrocketed last year, same as Garrett Greene's expectations. You even see a small percentage of West Virginia fans that think he should be in the Heisman race this year, which is
said, yes,
a little too crazy. But
yeah,
I think his completion rate realistically should be 58 to 60%.
Okay,
if he's going to improve that much. 65 is a big jump from 53.
Yeah, it's a big jump.
That's a really big jump. He would really, 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 really improve this offseason if he took that big of a jump.
Yeah, they don't win 10 games and he's at 65. There's something going on. Like the defense is awful, or he threw a bunch of picks.
Yeah. So I think that 58 to 60 range is pretty realistic if you want to see him improve.
Yeah.
I think the problem with Garrett's completion rate is, or I guess not a problem. It's not a problem at all. He's able to neutralize that obviously with his run game and we've talked about it before. He had Jaheim White, CJ Donaldson last year behind him, and then now with the receiving core, he's got a lot of depth there. So he definitely could find a couple favorite targets this upcoming season. So I think it's just on him and working on his games this offseason to improve that completion rate.
Yeah, and for the purpose of this, I'm not going to go on a whole rant on an argument that maybe completion percentage is an overrated stat to look at for a QB, because just, easily you could have a great completion percentage if you just throw checkdowns. If you just check it down a bunch of times, you're going to have a high completion percentage. But if they don't go anywhere, you don't score points, you don't move the chains, you catch a two-yard route and then you're tackled, you get the completion. Your completion percentage is good, but it didn't do anything for the offense. So I do think a little bit much is being made about it. And maybe I'm as guilty as anybody else because I've been writing and talking about it too. But I think part of it is what Greene said when we kind of prodded him to go deeper, that yes, he needs a higher completion percentage that is common to be closer to 60 for elite QBs and for elite teams, but it's also about being smarter. You don't just need to sit there and mentally say, I got to have a 65 completion percentage, so I'm going to avoid a wide open receiver who may drop it deep and just throw checkdowns all day. No, you need to be comfortable throwing a check down if that's all that's there, instead of trying to scramble for what feels like watching these games an eternity, trying to find a go route deep. And sometimes you find it, like what could have been the game winner, the Hudson Clement, that kind of was that type of play that it ended up not being the game winner, but that he scrambled forever, found Hudson, who got himself open. He got past the defense and got in the end zone. Sometimes it works out, and that's why the fans love Greene so much, but sometimes it doesn't, and the play's dead. And I think he needs to be smarter. That's what he's saying. I think 65 is wild. I got to look at some historic numbers. Going from 53 to 65 in 1 year. That got to be like the biggest jump ever. So I think 58, 60, though, is more reasonable for Greene and the depth around him, the running back situation, the way the offense should move with more fluidity and even be smoother this year. Hopefully he'll be healthier this year. All of that should lead into Greene being even better. Now, as we kind of round things out here, and we're going to lead a lot more to the football team coming up here, is we got Fan Day on Saturday. I'll get to talking to these guys even more and get to more practices here in the coming weeks. Both basketball programs are on foreign trips, Ethan. They're having a tour of Italy. The women's team already has a dub as we're talking right now. What are your thoughts on these foreign trips in general, what they do for these programs, what fans could even be watching for, looking for? Are they even meaningless and it's just kind of team bonding? I'll add out there that the men's team was supposed to go on this trip last year but canceled it because of all the drama with Huggins. now DeVries is taking them when Eilert was supposed to. But any thoughts on these foreign trips as we end the show?
It's super crucial for the men's program right now, especially turning that page into the new era with Darren DeVries. They have 11, 12, 13 new guys at this point. I think everybody's lost count on how many new players they have. Whole new staff's entirely new.
Yeah.
It's very important for this men's team to go on this foreign tour, team bonding, get some games in, doesn't matter what competition it is, playing somebody out of practice. Then you look
Should fans freak out if they lose a game?
No. It's
okay, because I gotta throw that out there. You know how it's gonna happen.
I think the teams that they're gonna play aren't that great, especially during the Olympic year.
Okay.
I still wouldn't freak out. It's August. But then flip side with the women's program, like it's two totally separate situations. Like women's brings back a lot of their core. Obviously they added a couple of pieces during the off season, but it wasn't even close to what the men's had to do. But it's still important for the women's program as well, just to continue that momentum that they had towards the end of the season. And it doesn't hurt to have a team bonding experience, and foreign trip will help. So the men's and women's programs are in two totally different situations with trying to build team chemistry on these foreign tours, but it's definitely beneficial for both of them.
Yeah, and the men's team, Darren DeVries can almost even call Kellogg, because the men's team now, coming off drama, a new era, new players, new coaching staff, a whole new vibe, is exactly where the women's team was a year ago. They were coming off drama. It wasn't a Hall of Fame coach, but still Don P left some drama. New coach, new staff, new system. Quinterly was there, but mostly a new core, new vibes. Everyone had to get to know the team and coaches a little bit. So it worked out for obviously the women's team last year. We'll see how the men's team does. Team bonding is never a bad thing, but I do think fans should not freak out on these scores or read too much into these box scores. Look how many minutes certain players play. Things like that maybe is better to watch out for, but you know that'll happen. You drop a game by double digits to a team that no one ever heard of any of these players. You especially mentioned too in an Olympic year, so you're not getting the best of the best. You're basically getting the C team effort probably of these teams they're going to be playing. There will be some freakouts, but yeah, you got to pump the brakes. It should be all positive that they're doing this, and
they got 3 months till the games matter.
Yeah,
they got enough time.
Yeah, and the roster still may change before the games start mattering. So that'll do it here for episode 2 of Mountaineer Report. Again, find us on YouTube, find us everywhere on social media. Hit up the coverage of WV Sports Now. Like, subscribe. We're going to have more of these next week as fall camp continues on, and hit on a lot more storylines that continue to unfold in fall camp as well. Also, I've already touched on them on the site, but we will touch on them here, and then we'll see the results of that foreign trip and whether there's any freaking out or not.